If you asked me beforehand,
that guy cost her millions.
Millions.
Millions. Millions and millions.
It was so
Imagine how long that podcast could have kept going.
And everything on the IP.
And they could have left and gone to Spotify the same way with her attached, and she would be fucking driving a pink Rolls Royce. And
Bob Menery is like the fucking perfect, right?
I'm sure he's going to hit you up about this very
shortly.
shortly.
He ain't doing nothing. He needs fucking work. He needs some money.
So do you regret anything you did?
Do I regret anything I did? The answer is yes, or he wouldn't be sitting
you
here
have to,
right now.
yeah.
Just give me a second. I'd like to think for a second.
Well, what happened?
The answer is yes, or we wouldn't be in this fucking room right now.
Well, no.
It's a big...
Did Bob Menery fumble an even bigger bag than Sofia did from Call Her Daddy? Bob Menery left the Full Send podcast about a year ago. No one really knows exactly why, but when Bob Menery left, he went on this big public rant on TikTok about how much the Full Send podcast was screwing him over, even though it was later reported they had paid him over $1 million for work done on the Full Send podcast. To be honest, I'm sure other people are in this boat. I had no clue who Bob Menery was before this podcast. Nelk had a massive channel. They were funneling their viewers over from the Nelk channel to Full Send podcast. Bob Menery, I think, made little funny Instagram videos where he dubbed over commentary. He did like sports commentary over old sports videos. I had no clue who this guy was. He goes on this Full Send podcast, becomes decently well known, makes $1 million, and then says he's being screwed over and leaves. But the question is, how much money do you think the stunt, him leaving the podcast for quote-unquote being screwed over, is going to cost him in the long term? Sofia from Call Her Daddy famously missed out on a $60 million Spotify deal after she left the Call Her Daddy show over a contract issue with Barstool. So Sofia, at least so far, has lost $30 million. Perhaps even more, as I'm not sure if Call Her Daddy has signed new deals. Is Bob Menery going to actually sacrifice more money than that in the long term? Full Send podcast is still very big in the podcast world. And based on this recent podcast, perhaps there's being a bridge built there a little bit. But the fact that Bob is no longer in the Full Send podcast, can no longer be a part owner. There's talk of some ownership deals of getting stakes in Happy Dad and stuff like that. How much money do you think Bob Menery cost himself in the long term by leaving the podcast about a year ago? Bob Menery is basically the classic example at the moment of short-term thinking versus long-term thinking. If he would have just shut his mouth and done his job like Dana White was trying to tell him in that recent podcast they had, he would be probably a multi-millionaire by now, probably on his way to earning tens of millions of dollars. Just being in that group with Dana White, the UFC, Happy Dad, Nelk, just being around that and working for them is an unbelievable scenario to be in. But Bob being so short-term minded totally is going to screw him over unless he can somehow build that bridge. But even if they build the bridge, I'm sure they'll always have trust issues about bringing him on as an equity partner or something like that. And even if the time when Bob worked on the Full Send podcast, like whatever it was, 2021, 2022, say he was getting paid 25% less than he should be getting paid. Who cares? Just do that for a while. You're in with this great company that earns a ton of money, Nelk and Full Send, affiliated basically with the UFC that earns a ton of money. Just do that. Just work there. It's so much smarter than trying to act like you're the person that matters the most in this whole organization and whine about a little bit of money that you may be being underpaid in the short term. Even if it's true, who cares? Just stay there with the Full Send podcast, Dana White, all these amazing connections. Just stay there, work, become a multi-millionaire in the long term. Even if you're getting paid during that entire long term 10% under what you should be being paid, that's still way better than being on your own now for a year and making almost nothing, or at least significantly less money than you'd be making working with the Nelk boys and Dana White. So we'll see what happens here, but let me know your thoughts in the comments. Did Bob Menery fumble an even bigger bag than Sofia from Call Her Daddy? Let me know. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.